The antiseptic smell had become my second skin. 3 years of medical school, and I still caught myself holding my breath when I first entered the sterile corridors of San Angelo Medical Center each morning. But today, the familiar scent mixed with something else. Something metallic and cold that settled in my stomach like a stone. I adjusted my white coat, fingers smoothing over the embroidered name that still felt too new, too official. Mackenzie Maloney, MD candidate, 6 more months. Just 6 more months until graduation, until the debt of sleepless nights and borrowed textbooks would finally transform into the career I'd sacrificed everything for. My phone buzzed in my pocket as I approached the nurse's station. Mom, probably. She'd been calling every morning since Dad's behavior had grown strange. Secretive late-night phone calls. Envelopes stuffed with cash appearing on the kitchen counter. That hollow look in his eyes when I asked where the money came from. Dr. Maloney. The head nurse, Patricia, looked up from her charts. Her expression held something I couldn't quite read. Pity? Concern? Dr. Reeves needs to see you in his office. Immediately. The stone in my stomach grew heavier. Department heads didn't summon fourth-year students to their offices for good news. I knocked on the heavy oak door, my knuckles barely making a sound against the solid wood. Come in. Dr. Reeves's voice carried that particular tone of careful neutrality that doctors learn to perfect. The tone that preceded bad news. He sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, his gray eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. But he wasn't alone. 2 men stood near the window, their presence transforming the familiar office into something foreign and threatening. One was older, perhaps 60, with silver hair slicked back, and a suit that probably cost more than my entire year's tuition. The other was younger, maybe early 30s, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of my appearance in a single sweep. He wore black from head to toe, the fabric clearly expensive despite its simplicity. There was something predatory in the way he held himself. Coiled. Waiting. Miss Maloney, Dr. Reeves began, and I noticed he didn't use my title. Not doctor. Miss. These gentlemen need to speak with you about a family matter. I don't understand. My voice came out steadier than I felt. What family matter? Is it my father? My sister? The younger man spoke, his voice low and carrying an accent that wrapped around certain consonants. Italian, but not the warm, familiar Italian of my grandmother's kitchen. This was something harder, more refined. Your father is fine, Miss Maloney, for now. My name is Santiago Caputo. This is my consigliere, Vincent Russo. We've come to discuss your father's debt to my family. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Debt, Caputo. The name triggered memories of whispered warnings, news stories carefully worded to avoid libel, the way certain people in our neighborhood cross the street rather than pass certain storefronts. I don't know what you're talking about. But even as I said it, pieces began falling into place. The mysterious inheritance from a distant uncle. The sudden ability to pay for my medical school, for my sister's undergraduate degree. The way Dad's hands had shaken when he signed those tuition checks. Santiago Caputo moved closer, and I forced myself not to step back. He was tall, I realized. Easily 6'2", with broad shoulders that filled out his black suit jacket perfectly. His face was all angles and sharp edges, handsome in a way that felt dangerous. A thin scar cut through his left eyebrow, barely visible, but somehow drawing attention to eyes that were nearly black in the dim office light. Your father came to my family 3 years ago, he said, his tone almost conversational. He needed money. A significant amount. Money to ensure his daughters could have the education he'd never been able to afford. A noble cause, really. My father, Don Salvatore Caputo, agreed to help. With certain conditions, naturally. My throat felt tight. What conditions? that the debt would be repaid, with interest, or with service. Santiago's gaze never left my face, reading every micro-expression. Your father was given 3 years to earn back what he borrowed. He hasn't, not even close. So the debt passes to you and your sister. But you, Miss Maloney, are uniquely positioned to settle everything. I don't have that kind of money. I'm still a student. I have loans of my own. We don't want your money. Vincent Russo spoke for the first time, his voice rougher than Santiago's. We want your skills. Dr. Reeves cleared his throat. The Caputo family has a private medical situation that requires discretion and expertise. They've requested that you be assigned to the case. I'm not qualified to handle private cases. I'm not even licensed yet. You're more qualified than you think, Santiago interrupted. Top of your class in neurology, specialized training in coma patients and brain trauma, fluent in Italian, which will be helpful for communication with my father's household staff. And most importantly, you carry a debt that makes you motivated to provide excellent care. The world seemed to slow down as understanding crashed over me. Your father, the Don Salvatore who helped my father, he's in a coma, Santiago finished. For 8 months now, the result of an incident. He requires round-the-clock monitoring, medication management, physical therapy to prevent muscle atrophy. Standard care for long-term coma patients. You'll move into the family compound, have access to state-of-the-art equipment, and provide whatever medical intervention he needs. And if I refuse? Something cold flickered in Santiago's dark eyes. You won't, because refusal means your father's debt becomes due immediately. $150,000 plus interest. And your father doesn't have that money. Neither does your mother. Or your sister, who's still in school thanks to my family's generosity. Refusal means your family loses everything. Their home, their security, their future. The threat hung in the air, unspoken but absolute. These weren't men who bluffed. How long? My voice sounded distant, as though someone else was speaking. How long would I have to do this? Until my father wakes up, Santiago said. Or until he doesn't. Either way, once your service is complete, your family's debt is cleared. Completely. You'll never owe us anything again. I looked at Dr. Reeves, silently pleading for him to intervene, to say this was illegal or impossible, or against university policy. But he simply looked back at me with that same careful neutrality. He'd already made his choice. Already decided which side of this equation held more power. I need to talk to my father, I said finally. Of course. Santiago reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, plain white with only a phone number embossed in black. Call me by tomorrow evening with your decision. But Miss Maloney? He waited until I looked up at him. We both know what that decision will be. Some debts can only be paid one way. After they left, I sat in the chair across from Dr. Reeves's desk, my legs suddenly unable to support my weight. You knew, I said. You knew they were coming. That's why you had me come here instead of just pulling me aside in the hospital. The Caputo family made a generous donation to this hospital's neurology wing, he said quietly. A 7-figure donation, and they made it clear that your cooperation was expected. I'm sorry, Mackenzie, but sometimes we have to make difficult choices for the greater good. The greater good. As if my future, my autonomy, my safety were acceptable sacrifices on the altar of hospital funding. I left his office and somehow made it to the parking garage before my hands started shaking. I sat in my car, an ancient Honda Civic with a cracked dashboard and a passenger door that only opened from the outside, and pulled out my phone. Dad answered on the first ring. Mackenzie? Sweetheart, is everything okay? What did you do? The words came out harsh, accusing. What the hell did you do, Dad? The silence on the other end stretched too long. Then, quietly, they came to see you. $150,000. From the Mafia. You took money from the actual Mafia to pay for my school, and you didn't think to tell me? Didn't think I deserved to know that every exam I passed, every patient I treated was built on borrowed blood money? It wasn't like that. His voice cracked. Mackenzie, I was desperate. Your mother was sick. You remember how sick she was. And you were so bright, so determined to be a doctor, and I couldn't. He stopped, collecting himself. I couldn't let you throw away your dreams because your father was a failure. So instead, you sold me to them. The words tasted bitter. You sold my future, my choices, without even asking. I thought I could pay it back. I really did. I got a second job. I've been working overtime. But the interest keeps growing and the economy tanked, and he was crying now. I'd heard my father cry exactly once before, at my grandmother's funeral. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. If I could take it back. But he couldn't. The debt existed. The contract was sealed. And I had until tomorrow evening to accept the only possible outcome. I drove to the apartment I shared with 2 other medical students, but I couldn't make myself go inside. Instead, I sat in the parking lot, watching the sun set behind the buildings, painting everything in shades of orange and red. Blood and fire. Appropriate, I thought numbly. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister, Anna, excited about her upcoming finals, talking about a guy she'd been seeing, casual and carefree because she didn't know yet. Didn't know that her education, her future, was collateral in a deal our father had made with men who solved problems with violence. I typed out a response, something light and encouraging, and tried not to think about how soon I'd have to tell her the truth. Another text appeared, this one from an unknown number. The message was simple. The car will arrive at 6 a.m. tomorrow to bring you to the compound. Bring clothes for an extended stay. Everything else will be provided. SC. No question mark. No request for confirmation. Just the assumption that I would comply, that I would surrender to this new reality, because I had no other choice. And I wouldn't. I couldn't. Because protecting my family meant accepting this cage, this debt, this dangerous proximity to a world I'd spent my life trying to avoid. I looked up at my apartment building, at the warm light glowing in the windows, and thought about how different everything would look tomorrow. How much would change once I stepped through those gates into the Caputo compound. How much of myself I would have to sacrifice to keep the people I loved safe. The phone buzzed again. Mom this time. Your father told me what happened. I'm so sorry, sweetheart, but you don't have to do this. We'll find another way. But there was no other way. We both knew it. The Caputos weren't the kind of family you said no to. They weren't the kind of men who accepted refusal. I texted back, "It's okay, Mom. I'll handle it. I love you." Then I called the number Santiago Caputo had given me. He answered immediately, as though he'd been waiting. "Miss Maloney." "I'll do it," I said, forcing the words out past the tightness in my throat. "I'll take care of your father, but I want it in writing. The exact terms. When the debt is satisfied. What's expected of me. Everything. Of course. Vincent will have the contracts ready when you arrive tomorrow. You'll have time to review them before signing. And my family? They're protected? No one touches them? No one threatens them? No matter what happens?" A pause. Then, "You have my word, Miss Maloney. As long as you uphold your end of this arrangement, your family is under the Caputo family's protection. No one will harm them. You have my personal guarantee." His personal guarantee. The promise of a mob boss. I should have laughed at the absurdity of it, at the dark comedy of my life taking this turn. But all I felt was cold, numb acceptance. "I'll see you tomorrow, then." "Tomorrow," he agreed. "And Miss Maloney? Thank you. My father deserves the best care possible. I believe you'll provide that." He hung up before I could respond. I sat there in the darkness of my car, the phone still pressed to my ear, and wondered what it meant that a man like Santiago Caputo believed I would do the right thing. That he trusted me, in his own twisted way. That night, I barely slept. I packed a suitcase with clothes and essentials, moving through my apartment like a ghost while my roommates slept. I wrote them a note explaining I'd been assigned to a private case that required live-in care. Not a lie, exactly. Just an omission of certain dangerous truths. At 5:45 a.m., I stood by the window, watching the street. At exactly 6:00, a black town car pulled up to the curb. The driver emerged, an older man with gray hair and a face that had seen too much. He looked up at my window as though he knew exactly where to find me. Time to go. I grabbed my suitcase and walked down to meet him, each step feeling like descending into some dark underworld from which I might never return. The driver opened the door without a word. I climbed into the back seat, inhaling the scent of leather and expensive cologne. And just like that, my old life ended. The drive to the Caputo compound took 40 minutes, leading us out of the city and into the hills where old money built its fortresses. We passed through a gate that opened automatically, guards visible but not intrusive, and wound up a long driveway lined with cypress trees. The mansion, rose before me like something from another era. Mediterranean architecture, all golden stone and terracotta roofs, with gardens that probably required a team of groundskeepers. This was where I would live now, where I would tend to a man I'd never met, in the shadow of his son who radiated danger like heat. The car stopped at the entrance. The driver opened my door, and I stepped out into my new reality. Santiago Caputo stood waiting on the steps, dressed in black again, his expression unreadable. "Welcome," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the space between us. "To your new home, Miss Maloney, for however long this takes." I lifted my chin, refusing to let him see my fear. "Where's my patient?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "This way. My father is waiting." The interior of the Caputo mansion was exactly what I'd expected, and nothing like I'd imagined. Dark wood paneling lined the walls, but instead of feeling oppressive, the space somehow felt warm, lived in. Family photographs covered every available surface. I caught glimpses of a younger Santiago, gap-toothed and grinning beside an older man who must have been his father. Don Salvatore, before the coma, before whatever incident had stolen him from this world. "The medical wing is on the second floor," Santiago said, leading me up a sweeping staircase. His footsteps were silent on the marble despite his size, moving with a grace that seemed at odds with his power. "We've converted 3 rooms, one for my father's care, one as your private quarters, and one for equipment storage and monitoring." Professional. He was being professional, treating this like a business arrangement rather than the coercion it actually was. I could work with that. Professional, I understood. I'll need to see his medical records. All of them. And I want to speak with whoever's been managing his care up until now. Dr. Castellano has been overseeing his treatment. He'll be here this afternoon to brief you on everything. His records are already in your room. Santiago stopped at a heavy door, his hand resting on the brass handle. "Before we go in, you should understand something. My father's condition is complicated. The injuries he sustained were severe. Multiple skull fractures, subdural hematoma, damage to the frontal and temporal lobes. The doctors give him less than a 30% chance of meaningful recovery." "Then why am I here?" The question came out sharper than I'd intended. If his prognosis is that poor, why not just... Because 30% isn't 0. Santiago's jaw tightened, the first crack in his controlled facade. Because he's my father, and while there's any chance at all, I'll take it. Because in my world, Miss Maloney, we don't abandon family. Ever. The word family hung between us, heavy with meanings I didn't fully understand. In my world, family meant Sunday dinners and borrowed money and disappointed silences. In his world, it apparently meant something else entirely. Something worth fighting for, worth coercing a medical student for. He opened the door. The room beyond was massive, easily the size of my entire apartment. But it had been transformed into a state-of-the-art medical facility. Monitors lined one wall, their screens displaying vital signs in steady, rhythmic patterns. An IV stand stood beside the hospital bed, bags of clear fluid hanging like promises. The bed itself was positioned near the window, natural light streaming across the figure lying motionless beneath white sheets. Don Salvatore Caputo looked smaller than I'd expected. The photographs had shown a robust man, broad-shouldered and commanding. The person in the bed seemed diminished, his face gaunt, his body atrophied from 8 months of immobility. But even unconscious, even broken, there was something in his features that reminded me of Santiago. The same strong jaw, the same high cheekbones, the same sense of barely contained power. I moved to the bedside, my training overriding my fear. This was what I knew how to do. This was solid ground in a world that had become quicksand. "Have you been doing range of motion exercises?" I asked, checking the catheter, the feeding tube, the electrode placements for the EEG monitoring. Muscle atrophy is significant, but not as bad as it could be after 8 months. A physical therapist comes twice daily. Santiago had moved to stand near the window, giving me space to work. Dr. Castellano insisted it was necessary, even with minimal hope of recovery. It is necessary. Even in vegetative states, maintaining muscle tone and flexibility can prevent complications when, consciousness returns. I picked up the chart hanging at the foot of the bed, flipping through pages of meticulously recorded data. Blood pressure, temperature, medication schedules, notes on pupil responses and involuntary movements. Someone had been taking excellent care of Don Salvatore. The question was, why they needed me. "Dr. Castellano is 72, Santiago said, as though reading my mind. "He's been with the family for 30 years, delivered me and my sister, patched up more injuries than I can count. But his hands shake now. His eyesight is failing. He can oversee treatment, but he can't provide the day-to-day monitoring my father needs. That's where you come in. And when I graduate, when I'm supposed to start my residency, you'll still graduate. I've already arranged it with your university. You'll complete your clinical hours here, under Dr. Castellano's supervision. Your medical education continues. This is simply specialized training." I should have been grateful. Should have thanked him for not derailing my career entirely. But all I felt was resentment at how thoroughly my life had been rearranged without my input. How easily powerful men could reshape the world to suit their needs. "I want to see the contracts," I said, setting down the chart. "Before I do anything else, I want everything in writing." Santiago pulled a folder from his jacket and held it out. "Vincent prepared these this morning. Take your time. If you have questions, ask." The contracts were surprisingly straightforward. I would provide full-time care for Don Salvatore Caputo until either his death or recovery to a point where he no longer required constant monitoring. In exchange, my father's debt of $150,000 would be forgiven, and my family would receive the Caputo family's protection for the duration of my service. There were clauses about confidentiality, about the consequences of abandoning my post, about what constituted adequate care. "This says I'm on duty 24 hours a day," I noted. "That's not sustainable. I need time off, breaks, opportunities to leave the compound. You'll have a day off each week, more if circumstances allow. There's a full staff here who can monitor basic vitals if you need to step away for a few hours." Santiago moved closer, and I caught that scent again. Expensive cologne with notes of cedar and something darker. "But yes, Essentially, this is your life for the foreseeable future. I won't pretend otherwise. My life, my prison. I picked up the pen and signed my name on the designated lines, each stroke of ink feeling like another bar sliding into place. There. I set the pen down with more force than necessary. Happy now? Satisfied, he corrected. Not happy. I'd prefer my father was conscious and you were graduating into a normal residency. But we work with what we have. He collected the contracts, his fingers briefly brushing mine. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through me, and I pulled back quickly. If Santiago noticed, he didn't react. Your quarters are through that door. I'll have your things brought up. Dr. Castellano will be here at 2. Until then, familiarize yourself with my father's routines and current medication schedule. He left without waiting for acknowledgement, the door closing softly behind him. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the unconscious man who had somehow become the center of my entire world. Don Salvatore Caputo, who had given my father money out of what? Generosity? Investment in future loyalty? Some calculated move in a game I didn't understand? I don't know what you were thinking, I told him quietly. Helping my father, getting involved with people like us. But now we're both stuck, aren't we? You in this bed, me in this house, both of us trapped by circumstances beyond our control. His monitors continued their steady beeping, indifferent to my words. I moved to the window, looking out over the grounds. Gardens stretched as far as I could see, meticulously maintained. A fountain sparkled in the afternoon sun. Beyond the walls, guards patrolled with subtle efficiency, beautiful and secure. A gilded cage. My phone buzzed. Anna, asking how the new position was going. I typed back something vague and optimistic, then turned the phone to silent. The less my family knew about the reality of my situation, the better. All right, I said, turning back to Don Salvatore. Let's see what we're working with. I spent the next 3 hours conducting a thorough assessment, neurological responses, muscle tone, skin integrity, positioning to prevent pressure sores. His pupils reacted to light, which was encouraging. Some involuntary movements occurred when I tested reflexes. Not much, but not nothing either. The medical records told a more complete story. The incident that had put Don Salvatore in this condition had involved significant blunt force trauma to the head. The initial CT scans showed massive bleeding and swelling. That he'd survived at all was remarkable. That anyone thought he might wake up bordered on delusional. But I'd seen stranger things in my clinical rotations. The human brain was remarkably plastic, capable of routing around damage in unexpected ways. 30% wasn't zero. Santiago had been right about that much. Dr. Castellano arrived precisely at 2, a small man with white hair and kind eyes that had seen too much. He moved slowly but with purpose, his handshake warm despite the tremor in his fingers. Ah, Miss Maloney. Santiago speaks very highly of your qualifications. His accent was thicker than Santiago's, old-world Italian. I'm grateful for your assistance. Salvatore deserves the best care, and I can no longer provide that alone. We reviewed his treatment plan together, and I was impressed despite myself. Dr. Castellano had been meticulous, trying various medication combinations to reduce brain swelling, managing infection risks, adjusting nutritional support based on metabolic needs. He'd done everything right. Has there been any change? I asked. Any moments of increased responsiveness, attempts at voluntary movement? 3 times in the past month, his heart rate has spiked during certain hours, always between 2 and 4 in the morning. No apparent cause, no environmental trigger we could identify. Dr. Castellano flipped to a page in his notes. I wondered if it might be connected to dreaming, to REM sleep patterns. but the EEG shows no corresponding change in brain activity. Interesting. I made a mental note to review the overnight monitoring data more carefully. I'll watch for it, I said. And I'd like to try increasing his physical therapy sessions. Twice daily might not be enough if we're serious about maintaining function. Santiago has already approved whatever you think is necessary. Cost is not a concern. Dr. Castellano smiled gently. You'll find that the Caputo family takes care of its own, Miss Maloney. And now, whether you like it or not, you are part of that circle. Part of the circle. The family. I wasn't sure if that was a promise or a threat. After Dr. Castellano left, I explored my own quarters. The room was larger than my entire apartment, decorated in soft creams and golds with a 4-poster bed that looked like it had been imported from some Italian villa. My suitcase sat on a bench at the foot of the bed, looking shabby and out of place. A knock on the connecting door made me jump. Santiago entered without waiting for permission, carrying a tray with covered plates. You haven't eaten since you arrived, he said, setting the tray on a small table near the window. Maria, our cook, thought you might be hungry. The smell hit me. Pasta with some kind of rich sauce, fresh bread, wine. My stomach growled traitorously. I can eat in my room, I said, not moving toward the food. You don't need to deliver meals personally. I'm not delivering a meal. I'm joining you for dinner. He pulled out a chair, waiting. Sit, Miss Maloney. We need to discuss how this arrangement will work. Every instinct screamed at me to refuse, to establish boundaries, to resist his assumption of control, but I was exhausted and hungry, and so far from anything resembling my normal life that I didn't have the energy to fight. I sat. Santiago poured wine into 2 glasses with practiced ease, then served me a generous portion of pasta. Maria makes the best carbonara in 3 states. I insist you try it. I'm on duty. I shouldn't drink. 1 glass won't impair your medical judgment, and you're going to need to learn to relax, Miss Maloney. This is your home now. You can't spend every moment at attention. Home. The word felt wrong in his mouth. This wasn't my home. This was my sentence. But the wine was excellent, and the carbonara was indeed the best I'd ever tasted. I ate in silence while Santiago watched me with those dark, assessing eyes. You're angry with me, he observed. With this entire situation. You forced me into servitude to pay a debt I didn't know existed. I think anger is appropriate. Forced is a strong word. You made a choice. A choice between this and watching my family destroyed. That's not really a choice. No, he agreed. I suppose it isn't. He took a sip of wine. But here we are regardless, so we might as well make the best of it. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who gave up their entire future. Haven't I? Something flickered in his expression. My father's condition has made me dawn before I was ready. I'm responsible for hundreds of people, for business interests across 3 continents, for maintaining alliances and managing threats I barely understand. I would give anything to have my father back, to not carry this weight. But we don't always get what we want, Miss Maloney. We get what we're given, and we find a way to survive it. For a moment, just a moment, I saw past the power and control to something more human underneath. The pressure he carried, the fear he couldn't show, the son desperately trying to save his father while holding together an empire he'd never expected to inherit. Then the moment passed, and his expression hardened again. You'll be compensated beyond the debt forgiveness, he continued. A salary, access to anything you need, and when this is over, regardless of the outcome, I'll provide you with recommendations that will open any door in the medical field you choose. I don't want your money or your influence. I want my life back. Then do your job well, and perhaps you'll have it. He stood, collecting the dishes. Get some rest, Miss Maloney. Tomorrow your real work begins. After he left, I sat alone in that beautiful room, and tried not to think about how thoroughly my life had been dismantled. How every plan I'd made, every dream I'd nurtured, had been redirected into this strange new channel. I checked on Don Salvatore one more time before trying to sleep. His vitals were stable, his breathing steady. I adjusted his position slightly, checked the IV flow rate, made notes in his chart. 30% chance, I whispered. Let's see if we can improve those odds. Because that was all I had now. This man, this patient, this key to my eventual freedom. If I could wake him up, if I could give Santiago back his father, then maybe, just maybe, I could reclaim my own life. It was something to hope for, at least. Something to work toward in this beautiful, terrible cage. 3 weeks passed in a rhythm that became almost normal. I woke each morning to the soft chime of an alarm I'd programmed into Don Salvatore's monitoring system, alerting me to medication times. The first rays of sunlight would creep through the tall windows of my room, catching on the expensive fabrics and polished furniture that still didn't feel like mine. I'd learned to move through the mansion's corridors without getting lost, memorized which doors led where, which staff members were friendly, and which maintained a careful distance. Maria, the cook, would leave espresso and fresh cornetti outside my door each morning. Giuseppe, the head of security, would nod respectfully when we passed. And Santiago. Santiago was everywhere and nowhere. I'd catch glimpses of him through windows, pacing the garden with his phone pressed to his ear, his expression carved from stone. He'd appear in Don Salvatore's room at unpredictable hours, standing silently near the bed, watching his father breathe. Sometimes he'd ask me clinical questions, changes in vital signs, responses to stimuli, any indication of improvement. Other times he'd simply sit in the chair near the window, reading documents or making notes, his presence heavy and distracting. I'd started to notice things about him. The way he rolled his shoulders when stressed, as if trying to shake off weight. How his accent thickened when he was tired or angry. The fact that he never drank coffee after noon, but always had a glass of whiskey at exactly 7 p.m., standing at the window of his father's room, looking out over the estate like a king surveying his kingdom. I shouldn't have been noticing these things. Shouldn't have been cataloging his habits like they mattered. But in the strange isolation of the compound, Santiago became one of the few constants in my days. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday night. I was conducting routine neurological checks when Don Salvatore's left hand twitched. Not the involuntary spasms I'd seen before. This was different, purposeful. His fingers curled slightly, as if trying to grip something that wasn't there. My heart rate kicked up. "Mr. Caputo? Salvatore?" I leaned closer, shining my penlight to check pupil response. "Can you hear me? If you can hear me, try to move your hand again." Nothing for 10 seconds. 20. Then, there. Another twitch, deliberate. Responding. I hit the call button that connected directly to Santiago's private line. He answered on the first ring, his voice sharp with immediate alertness. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Something's right. Get up here. Now." He arrived in less than 2 minutes, still wearing the dress shirt and slacks from whatever meeting he'd been in, his hair slightly disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. "What happened?" "Watch." I repeated the neurocheck, and Don Salvatore's hand moved again. Slight, but unmistakable. Santiago's breath caught audibly. Is he waking up? Not yet. This is increased responsiveness to stimuli, which is excellent, but it doesn't necessarily mean consciousness is imminent. I made notes on the chart, trying to keep my clinical objectivity despite my own excitement. However, it's the most significant progress he's shown since the injury. His brain is healing, making new connections. The 30% just got a lot better. Santiago moved to his father's bedside, taking the older man's hand gently. "Papa, can you hear me? It's Santiago. I'm here. We're all here. Don Salvatore's fingers moved again, and I watched Santiago's face transform. The mask of control cracked completely, revealing raw hope and desperate love underneath. He's responding to your voice, I observed quietly. Keep talking to him. Santiago did, speaking in rapid Italian, telling his father about business developments, family news, how the gardens looked this season. And Don Salvatore's hand continued to move, small twitches that communicated volumes. I updated his chart, adjusted his medication schedule to reduce sedation slightly, made plans to increase physical therapy to 3 times daily. If his brain was becoming more active, we needed to be ready for him. This is because of you, Santiago said when he finally stepped away from the bed, his voice rough with emotion. Your care, your attention to detail. Dr. Castellano said you've been relentless, trying different approaches, researching new treatments. I'm doing my job, but his gratitude made me uncomfortable in a way I didn't want to examine. Don't read too much into this. Progress isn't linear with brain injuries. He could plateau tomorrow, could regress. We can't get ahead of ourselves. Ever the pessimist, ever the realist. I filed the chart and turned to face him fully. In my field, false hope kills more people than honest assessment. I'll be thrilled if he wakes up, but I won't promise it until I see sustained improvement. Santiago studied me with that intense gaze that always felt like he was looking past my words to something deeper. You're afraid to hope. Why? The question caught me off guard with its bluntness. I'm not afraid. I'm careful. Same thing, sometimes. He moved closer, and I found myself backing up until the edge of the counter pressed against my spine. What happened that made you so determined to never be disappointed? I'm standing in a mansion, caring for a mob boss because my father made a deal with the devil. Forgive me if I've learned to manage my expectations. Your father made a deal with my father, Santiago corrected. And despite what you might think, Salvatore isn't the devil. He's a man who provides for his people, who protects what's his, who values loyalty above everything else. He was close now, close enough that I could smell his cologne, could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes. Much like his son. I should have moved away, should have established distance, maintained professionalism. But I found myself frozen, caught in his orbit like some helpless planet circling a dark star. You must miss him, I said, my voice coming out softer than intended. Your father. Not just as the Don, but as your dad. Something shifted in Santiago's expression. Vulnerability, brief but devastating. Every day, every decision I make, I wonder if he'd approve, if I'm doing this right, if I'm strong enough to fill his shoes. He reached up, and for a moment, I thought he might touch my face. Instead, his hand stopped midair, fingers curling into a fist before dropping to his side. You're dangerous, Miss Maloney. I'm a medical student. I'm not dangerous to anyone. You make me say things I don't tell people, feel things I can't afford to feel. His jaw tightened. That makes you very dangerous indeed. Before I could respond, he turned and walked out, leaving me standing there with my heart pounding and my mind racing with questions I shouldn't have been asking. The next morning brought visitors. I was checking Don Salvatore's vitals when voices drifted up from the first floor. Multiple male voices, speaking Italian too quickly for me to follow. Then Santiago appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. My sister is here, he said. Bianca. She wants to see Papa. Of course, family visits are beneficial. The familiar voices might help stimulate. She also wants to meet you. Something in his tone put me on alert. She's protective of the family. Be prepared for questions. Bianca Caputo swept into the room 10 minutes later, and I immediately understood Santiago's warning. She was beautiful, elegantly dressed in designer clothes that fit like they'd been made for her body specifically. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, and her eyes, the same dark brown as Santiago's, assessed me with open suspicion. "So you're the medical student my brother has trusted with our father's life." Her accent was lighter than Santiago's, overlaid with expensive private school. "Forgive me if I'm skeptical." "Bianca," Santiago's voice carried a warning. "No, it's fine." I straightened, meeting her gaze directly. "You're right to be skeptical. I'm young, I'm not fully licensed, and I have a personal stake in your father's recovery that could compromise my objectivity. But I'm also very good at my job, and I care about my patients regardless of the circumstances that brought them to me. Your father is showing signs of improvement under my care. That should count for something." Bianca blinked, clearly not expecting me to stand my ground. Then slowly, she smiled. "I like her, Santiago. She has spine." "I'd noticed," he said dryly. Bianca moved to her father's bedside, taking his hand with a gentleness that transformed her entire demeanor. "Hi, Papa. It's Bianca. I brought you those awful butter cookies you love. We'll have them together when you wake up, yes?" Don Salvatore's hand twitched, and Bianca gasped. "Did you see that?" "He's been responding more," I explained, "especially to familiar voices. Keep talking to him. Tell him about your life. Anything you think he'd want to know." Bianca did, chattering about her gallery opening, her upcoming trip to Milan, neighborhood gossip that would have been meaningless to an outsider, but clearly mattered to this family. And Don Salvatore continued to respond with small movements, his brain recognizing his daughter, even if he couldn't wake up to see her. I left them alone, giving the family privacy. But as I passed through the doorway, I heard Bianca say quietly to Santiago, "You trust her. Really trust her. I can see it." "I do," Santiago replied. "More than I probably should." His words followed me down the hallway, settling into my chest like stones. Trust. It should have meant nothing, but somehow, coming from a man who trusted no one, it felt like something significant, something dangerous. That evening, I found myself in the library, a room I'd discovered by accident my first week, but had been too intimidated to explore. Floor-to-ceiling shelves held books in multiple languages. A fire crackled in the hearth despite the mild weather. Leather armchairs invited reading. I was examining a first-edition medical text from the 1800s when Santiago appeared in the doorway. "Settling in?" he asked. "Trying. This library is incredible. I've never seen a private collection like this. My grandfather started it. My father added to it. I contribute when I find something worthy." He moved to the shelf beside me, pulling down a slim volume. This was my father's favorite, Dante. He could recite entire passages from memory. The Inferno? Paradiso, actually. He always said anyone could describe hell. Only the truly gifted could imagine heaven. Santiago opened the book, his fingers tracing the Italian text. He used to read it to me when I was young, his way of teaching me our language, our culture. I saw it then. The boy he must have been before responsibility hardened him. The son who learned poetry at his father's knee. "What's your favorite part?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment, then began reading in Italian, his voice low and mesmerizing. I didn't understand all the words, but the emotion behind them was clear. Love, longing, faith in something better, beyond the suffering of mortal life. When he finished, he looked at me. "Do you know what it means?" "Not word for word, but I understand enough. It's about hope, isn't it? About believing there's something worth fighting for even when everything seems lost. You're more perceptive than you pretend to be, Miss Maloney." "Mackenzie," I heard myself say. "If we're going to be living in the same house indefinitely, You might as well use my first name." A slow smile transformed his face. "Mackenzie. It suits you. Strong, but with an edge of softness underneath." He set the book down. "And you should call me Santiago. Mr. Caputo is far too formal for people who've seen each other at 3 a.m. in pajamas." The reminder of our informal encounters made heat rise to my cheeks. He'd caught me several times in my sleep clothes, oversized t-shirts and shorts, during late-night medication checks. I'd been too exhausted and focused on my patient to care much about modesty. "I should get back," I said, suddenly aware of how small the library felt with him in it. "I want to monitor your father's vitals through the night. If this improvement continues—" "Mackenzie." My name on his lips stopped me. "Thank you. For everything you're doing. For caring about him beyond the debt, beyond the obligation. I see it in how you talk to him, how you adjust his blankets, how you've been researching new treatments on your own time. That kind of dedication can't be forced. And he's my patient. I take care of my patients. He's more than that now, and you know it." I did know it. Somewhere over the past 3 weeks, Don Salvatore had stopped being just the key to my freedom and had become someone I genuinely wanted to help. Someone whose family's grief had become almost personal. "Good night, Santiago," I said, using his name intentionally, watching his eyes darken at the sound of it. "Good night, Mackenzie." I left the library feeling like something had shifted between us. Some line had been crossed that I couldn't quite identify, but knew I should probably be worried about. Back in Don Salvatore's room, I settled into the chair near his bed with my tablet, reviewing case studies of similar injuries and their outcomes. The night was quiet, except for the steady beep of monitors and the soft sound of the old man's breathing. Around 2 a.m., his heart rate suddenly spiked, just as Dr. Castellano had noted. I watched carefully, checking for any environmental trigger. But there was nothing, just Don Salvatore's body responding to something internal, something I couldn't see or measure. I pulled up his EEG data, studying the brainwave patterns. There, a slight increase in activity during these episodes. Not enough to indicate waking, but enough to suggest something was happening. Some process working beneath the surface. "What are you dreaming about?" I whispered. "What's important enough to make your heart race even in sleep?" His hand twitched, and I took it gently. "It's okay. Whatever you're experiencing, you're safe. Your family is here. Your son is working so hard to keep everything running, to be the man you raised him to be. But he needs you, Salvatore. They all need you. So keep fighting. Keep coming back." The heart rate spike lasted 15 minutes before settling back to normal. I made detailed notes, adding my observations to the growing file I was building. If this was a pattern, if something specific was triggering these responses, maybe I could use it. Maybe I could find a way to reach him. I fell asleep in the chair, my head resting on the edge of the bed, exhausted, but hopeful. I woke to the feeling of someone watching me. My eyes opened to find Santiago standing in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light, his expression unreadable. "You should sleep in your own bed," he said quietly. "You'll hurt your neck sleeping like that." I wanted to monitor him through the night. The heart rate spikes can be monitored from your room through the system I had installed. There's no need to sacrifice your own comfort. He moved into the room, and I saw he was wearing sleep pants and a t-shirt, his hair mused from sleep. "Come on, I'll walk you back." I should have argued, should have insisted I was fine. But my neck did hurt, and my back was stiff from the awkward position. I stood slowly, stretching out the kinks. "You care too much," Santiago observed. "It's going to break you eventually. Better than not caring at all." We walked through the quiet house, and I was acutely aware of his presence beside me. His height, his warmth, the controlled power in his movements. At my door, he stopped. "Get some rest, Mackenzie. That's an order. You can't order me around in my personal time." "Can I?" But he was smiling slightly, and I realized with some surprise that we were almost teasing each other, almost friendly. "Good night, Santiago." "Good night." I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart beating faster than it should have been. This was dangerous. Getting comfortable here, starting to see these people as more than my captors, starting to see Santiago as more than the man who'd coerced me into servitude. But I couldn't seem to stop myself from sliding down that slope, and I wasn't entirely sure I wanted to. The improvement in Don Salvatore's condition continued over the following days, subtle but undeniable. His responses became more consistent, his hand movements stronger. He began to track sound with his closed eyes, turning his head slightly toward voices. Small victories that felt monumental. Dr. Castellano was cautiously optimistic. "I've seen many coma patients in my years, Mackenzie. What you're achieving here is remarkable. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." But I knew it wasn't just medical intervention. It was the constant presence of family, the familiar voices, the touches of love that reached through the darkness of unconsciousness. Bianca visited daily now, bringing fresh flowers and gossip. Other family members cycled through, cousins, uncles, even Don Salvatore's elderly mother, who clutched my hand and blessed me in Italian before sitting with her son. And Santiago. Santiago was a constant gravitational force. He'd taken to working from his father's room several hours each day, his laptop set up on a small desk near the window. He made calls in Italian and English, his voice shifting between steel and silk, depending on who was on the other end. I tried not to eavesdrop, but it was impossible not to hear bits and pieces. Business deals that sounded almost legitimate, references to shipments and territories that definitely weren't, names I recognized from news reports, people whose activities existed in legal gray areas. Santiago managed it all with ruthless efficiency, his control absolute even as I could see the weight of it bearing down on him. "You should take a break," I told him one afternoon, after he'd been on calls for 4 straight hours. "Even you need to rest." "I'll rest when he wakes up." But he rubbed his temples, a rare admission of fatigue. That could be weeks yet. Months even. I saved the notes I'd been reviewing and closed my tablet. "You're no good to anyone if you burn out. Burnout is a luxury I can't afford, Mackenzie." He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there a week ago. People depend on me. Families, businesses, employees who need their paychecks to feed their children. If I falter, all of that falls apart. And if you collapse from exhaustion, who takes over then? He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, apparently having no answer. "Come on," I said impulsively. "Walk with me. Fresh air, sunlight, 15 minutes away from your phone. Doctor's orders. You're not a doctor yet. Close enough, now move." To my surprise, he complied. We walked through the gardens, and I noticed how meticulously they were maintained. Roses bloomed in organized rows. Hedges were precisely trimmed. Even the gravel paths were perfectly raked. "Does everything in your world have to be so controlled?" I asked. "Control is the illusion that keeps chaos at bay." He stopped near the fountain, watching water cascade over stone. "My father taught me that. The moment you let things slip, even slightly, everything starts to unravel. So yes, I control what I can. Because there's so much I can't control." His gaze moved to the house, to the window of his father's room. "Like whether he wakes up. Like how long you'll need to stay here. Like this feeling." He stopped abruptly. "What feeling?" I prompted. "Never mind. It's not appropriate." But I'd heard the shift in his voice. seen the way his jaw tightened. I knew exactly what feeling he meant because I'd been fighting the same thing. This pull between us, inappropriate and impossible, growing stronger despite every logical reason to resist it. "We should get back," he said, already turning toward the house. "I have a call with the New York families in 20 minutes. I followed him, disappointed by his retreat, but also relieved. Because the alternative, acknowledging what was building between us, would only make everything more complicated. That evening brought unexpected trouble. I was adjusting Don Salvatore's IV when raised voices drifted up from downstairs. Men's voices, angry and overlapping. Then Santiago's, cutting through the noise with quiet authority. Curious and concerned, I made sure my patient was stable before slipping into the hallway. The sounds came from Santiago's office on the first floor. I crept closer, staying in the shadows, knowing I shouldn't eavesdrop, but unable to resist. "Disrespectful to the memory of Don Salvatore," one man was saying. He wouldn't have tolerated this arrangement. "My father isn't dead," Santiago replied, his voice deadly calm. "And until he is, or until he wakes and says otherwise, I make the decisions for this family." "A medical student," another man scoffed. "You've brought an outsider into our home, given her access to the Don himself. What if she's working for the feds? What if this is all a setup?" My blood ran cold. They were talking about me. "Mackenzie Maloney has been thoroughly vetted," Santiago said. "Her background is clean. Her only connection to any of this is her father's debt, which we're using as leverage to ensure her loyalty." "Loyalty bought with coercion doesn't last," the first man argued. "What happens when the debt is paid? When she walks away with everything she's seen and heard?" "That won't happen." "How can you be so sure?" A pause. Then Santiago's voice, quieter but no less firm. "Because I won't let it. Mackenzie is under the family's protection, which means she's also under the family's watch. If she ever becomes a threat, it will be dealt with. But she won't. I trust her. Your trust could destroy us all. My judgment hasn't failed this family yet. Don't question it now." The sound of chairs scraping made me retreat quickly, pressing myself into an alcove as men filed out of the office. They passed within feet of me, their faces hard with disapproval. When they were gone, I released a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I'd known abstractly that the family would be suspicious of my presence, but hearing it stated so bluntly, that I was being watched, that any wrong move could result in being dealt with, sent fear coursing through me. I was trapped in a house full of people who didn't trust me, under the protection of a man whose trust came with its own dangers. I made it back to Don Salvatore's room without being seen, and tried to focus on my work. But my hands shook as I checked his vitals, and my mind kept replaying Santiago's words. I trust her. Why did that feel both like a gift and a burden? Santiago appeared in the doorway an hour later. His expression was stormy, his shoulders tight with tension. "You heard?" he said, not a question. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I was concerned about the noise. Don't lie to me, Mackenzie. Not now." He closed the door behind him, leaning against it. "You heard every word." I nodded, wrapping my arms around myself. "Are they right? Will you have to deal with me when this is over?" "No." The word was absolute. "But they don't know that. They don't see what I see. That you're not a threat. That you genuinely care about my father. That you're as trapped in this situation as we are. They just see an outsider with dangerous knowledge." "Then why defend me? Wouldn't it be easier to—" I couldn't finish the sentence. Santiago crossed the room in 3 strides, his hands coming to rest on my shoulders. "Because you matter. Your safety matters. And yes, before you ask, that complicates everything." His grip tightened slightly. "I should keep my distance from you. should maintain professional boundaries, should think of you only as my father's caretaker. But I can't seem to do any of those things. My heart hammered against my ribs. Santiago, you make me want things I can't have, feel things I can't afford to feel, and it's driving me insane. His voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. Tell me you don't feel it too. Tell me I'm alone in this, and I'll back away. I'll give you space. I'll be nothing but professional from now on. I should have lied, should have given us both an escape from this impossible situation. But standing there with his hands on my shoulders, his dark eyes boring into mine, I couldn't make myself say the words. I feel it, I admitted, but that doesn't mean we should act on it. This is already complicated enough without what? Without admitting that somewhere in the past month, you've become more than just someone working off a debt? That I look forward to our conversations more than I should? That I find excuses to be in the same room as you? He released me suddenly, stepping back. You're right. This is impossible. Inappropriate, dangerous for both of us. Then why are we even having this conversation? Because I'm tired of pretending. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. Because you deserve to know that my interest in you goes beyond professional. Because if we're going to continue working together in such close proximity, we need to address this tension before it consumes us both. And then what? We acknowledge it exists and go back to ignoring each other? That's not how feelings work, Santiago. Then tell me what you want, Mackenzie. Tell me how we navigate this impossible situation without destroying everything. I didn't have an answer, because what I wanted was impossible. To explore this connection without the weight of obligation and coercion. To see where it led without his family watching my every move. To kiss him without wondering if it made me weak or foolish or both. I want my life back, I said finally, the words coming out harsh. I want to finish my degree on my terms, start my career without mob connections hanging over my head. I want to choose my own path instead of having it dictated by circumstances beyond my control. That's what I want. And you can't give me any of it as long as I'm here paying my father's debt. Something in his expression closed off. You're right. I can't. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Sorry your father made that deal. Sorry you're trapped here. Sorry that meeting you has made everything more complicated than it already was. He left without waiting for a response. I stood there in the quiet room, listening to Don Salvatore's steady breathing, and wondered how everything had gotten so tangled. How I'd gone from resenting my captivity to craving conversations with my captor. How Santiago had gone from threatening figure to complex man whose burdens I wanted to ease. This was exactly what Dr. Castellano had warned about. The danger of caring too much. But it was too late to stop now. I was already in too deep, already invested in this family's drama, already beginning to feel like maybe, just maybe, I belonged here more than I wanted to admit. And that realization terrified me more than any threat from Santiago's suspicious associates ever could. The shift in dynamics was immediate and uncomfortable. Santiago stopped working from his father's room. He'd drop by twice daily, morning and evening, to check on Don Salvatore's condition, but the visits were brief and strictly professional. No more casual conversations, no more shared moments of vulnerability. I told myself this was better, safer, that maintaining distance would make it easier when I eventually left. I almost believed it. You're brooding, Bianca observed one afternoon. She'd become a regular fixture, often staying for hours to keep her father company. Did my brother do something stupid? Your brother is very professional, I replied, checking the latest medication log. That's a yes, then. Santiago only gets aggressively professional when he's trying not to feel something. She studied me with those sharp Caputo eyes. What happened between you two? Nothing happened. That's the point. Ah. Bianca leaned back in her chair. So something almost happened, he got scared, and now he's retreating behind his walls. Classic Santiago. It's more complicated than that. It always is with him. She sighed. Did he give you the speech about duty and obligation, and how he can't afford distractions? I stared at her. How did you know? Because I've watched him give that speech to every woman who's ever gotten close to him, which, granted, hasn't been many. Santiago doesn't do relationships. He does transactions. Everything in his life is measured by what it costs and what it's worth. She paused. Except you. You're the first person I've seen him get tangled up over without calculating the return on investment first. That doesn't change the circumstances. I'm here because I have to be, not because I chose it. Any feelings that develop under those conditions are suspect. Are they? Or are they just inconvenient? Bianca stood, moving to the window. My father once told me something. He said, "The heart doesn't consult the mind before it chooses. It simply chooses. And then we have to decide what to do about it." I think that's what's happening here. Both of you are choosing each other despite every logical reason not to. Your brother isn't choosing me. He's managing a complication. Keep telling yourself that. She smiled mysteriously. But I've known Santiago his entire life. I've watched him control his emotions with military precision, sacrifice everything he wants for duty and obligation. This is the first time I've seen him struggle with that control. The first time someone, has made him question whether the cost is worth it. Before I could respond, Don Salvatore's monitors suddenly changed. His heart rate spiked dramatically. Not the gradual increase I'd seen during his nighttime episodes, but a sharp, sudden jump. His eyelids fluttered, and his hands clenched into fists. What's happening? Bianca rushed to her father's side. I was already moving, checking connections, assessing vitals, my mind racing through possibilities. His brain activity is increasing. This could be... I didn't finish the sentence. Didn't want to say it out loud in case I was wrong. But Don Salvatore's eyes opened. Slowly, like heavy curtains being pulled back. His eyelids lifted. His pupils were dilated, unfocused, but they were moving, searching, aware. Papa? Bianca's voice broke. Papa, can you hear me? His gaze found her face, and something shifted in his expression. Recognition. Confusion. Then his mouth opened, and a rough, barely audible sound emerged. BB. Anka. I hit the call button for Santiago, then immediately began assessing Don Salvatore's neurological function. Mr. Caputo, can you tell me your name? Do you know where you are? His eyes moved to me, taking in my unfamiliar face with clear wariness. Who? My name is Mackenzie. I'm your doctor. You've been in a coma for 8 months. You're home, you're safe, and your family is here. Santiago burst through the door, his expression wild. What? He stopped dead at the sight of his father's open eyes. Papa? Tiago? Don Salvatore's voice was weak, but his gaze locked onto his son with intensity. What happened? You were hurt, Papa, but you're awake now. You're going to be okay. Santiago moved to the bedside, taking his father's hand carefully. The normally controlled Don looked like he might break apart from sheer relief. I continued my assessment, checking motor function, pupil responses, asking orientation questions. Don Salvatore was confused and weak, but his cognitive function appeared remarkably intact considering the severity of his injury. I need to call Dr. Castellano, I said, and we should run a full neurological battery. But preliminary assessment looks extremely positive. Mr. Caputo, you've beaten very long odds. How long? Don Salvatore asked, his gaze moving between his children. 8 months. Santiago replied. You've been gone for 8 months, Papa. Business? Running smoothly. We've handled everything. You just focus on recovery now. But I saw tension in Santiago's jaw, the weight of decisions made and secrets kept. Dr. Castellano arrived within the hour, and the rest of the day became a whirlwind of tests and assessments. Don Salvatore's awakening was nothing short of miraculous. His brain function was better than anyone had predicted. His physical deficits minimal compared to what we'd feared. There would be rehabilitation ahead, physical therapy and cognitive exercises, but the prognosis was excellent. This is your doing, Dr. Castellano told me quietly, while Don Salvatore slept under the sedation we'd given him to rest after the excitement. Your care, your research, your refusal to accept that 30% chance. You've given this family their patriarch back. We all work together, I demurred. This was a team effort. Accept the credit, Mackenzie. You've earned it. That evening, Santiago found me in my room. I'd retreated there after the chaos, needing space to process everything that had just happened. The end goal had been achieved. Don Salvatore was awake, which meant my debt was essentially paid, which meant I'd be leaving soon. He's asking for you, Santiago said from the doorway. My father wants to meet the doctor who kept him alive. I followed him back to Don Salvatore's room, suddenly nervous. The man was propped up on pillows now, looking more alert than he had earlier. His eyes, dark like Santiago's, fixed on me with sharp intelligence. Miss Maloney, he said, his voice stronger already. Santiago tells me you've been caring for me these past months, under unusual circumstances. Yes, sir. Your son and I had an arrangement regarding my father's debt. Ah, the debt. Don Salvatore's expression was unreadable. Tell me, did my son treat you well? Give you everything you needed? The question felt loaded. He was. Fair. Professional. He kept his word about my family's protection. But you're eager to leave now that your obligation is fulfilled? Was I? A month ago, the answer would have been an immediate yes. But now, looking at this family I'd become entangled with, I wasn't sure what I wanted. I want to finish my degree, I said carefully. Start my residency. Those were my plans before all this began. Don Salvatore studied me for a long moment. Plans change. Sometimes what we think we want isn't what we actually need. His gaze moved to Santiago. Leave us. I wish to speak with Miss Maloney alone. Santiago looked like he wanted to argue, but his father's tone brooked no disagreement. He left, though I could feel his reluctance. Sit, Don Salvatore instructed, gesturing to the chair beside his bed. I obeyed, wondering what was coming. My son cares for you. He tries to hide it, but a father knows his child. I see it in how he speaks your name, how he positioned himself between you and the door just now. Protective, possessive, concerned. He's concerned about many things. I'm just one obligation among many. You're more than that, and we both know it. The Don's voice was gentle but firm. The question is, what do you intend to do about it? Nothing. I fulfill my contract, I leave, I resume my life. That's what's supposed to happen. Supposed to. He smiled slightly. Life rarely goes as supposed to, Miss Maloney. I've learned that many times over. Tell me, do you care for my son? The direct question caught me off guard. It's complicated. The circumstances... Forget the circumstances. Simple question. Do you care for him? I could have lied. Should have lied. But something in Don Salvatore's gaze demanded honesty. Yes. But that doesn't change the fundamental problem. Any relationship that starts with coercion is built on an unstable foundation. I can't trust that my feelings are real, and not just Stockholm Syndrome. And he can't trust that I'm not just trying to secure my position. Stockholm Syndrome. Don Salvatore chuckled, then winced. Americans always need to label everything. Sometimes a man and a woman simply recognize each other, find something worth holding on to despite impossible circumstances. He paused. I met my wife when she was my hostage. Did Santiago tell you that story? No. Her father owed money to my father. I was sent to collect. She refused to go quietly, so I had to keep her at our family compound until the debt was settled. 3 days of her fighting me every step of the way. By day 4, I was in love. By day 7, so was she. We were married a month later and had 42 years together before she passed. His eyes grew distant with memory. The best 42 years of my life, all because I refused to let a beautiful, stubborn woman walk away. That's different. You had time. We've only known each other a month, and most of that was spent with me resenting the situation. A month can be enough when it's the right person. But I'm not telling you what to do, Miss Maloney. I'm simply suggesting you consider all your options before you make a choice you might regret. Santiago returned then, and the conversation shifted to medical matters. But Don Salvatore's words echoed in my mind long after I'd left the room. That night, unable to sleep, I found myself wandering the gardens. The moon was bright, casting everything in silver light. I walked without direction, lost in thought, until I realized I'd ended up at the fountain where Santiago and I had talked weeks ago. Can't sleep either? His voice came from the shadows, and I turned to find him sitting on a stone bench, a glass of whiskey in his hand. Your father woke up today. I thought you'd be celebrating. I am. Quietly. He gestured to the seat beside him, and after a moment's hesitation, I joined him. He's asking questions I'm not ready to answer. About the business, about decisions I've made in his absence. Some of those decisions. He trailed off. Were necessary to keep everything running. Were necessary to survive. There's a difference. He took a sip of whiskey. I've done things these past 8 months that my father wouldn't have approved of. Made alliances he would have rejected. Gotten my hands dirty in ways he'd tried to keep me clean from. He looked at me. You're going to leave, aren't you? Now that the debt is paid. Isn't that what's supposed to happen? Supposed to. There's that phrase again. He set down his glass. Mackenzie, I need to tell you something. Your father's debt, it was forgiven months ago. The words didn't make sense at first. What? I had Vincent draw up the paperwork 6 weeks into your service. Your father's obligation was cleared. The protection extended regardless of whether you stayed or left. You've been free to go for over a month now. Anger surged through me. You lied to me. You made me think I had to stay. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you the truth. He held up a hand before I could explode. I know that's not much better, but I was afraid if you knew, you'd leave immediately, and I wasn't ready for you to leave. Not because of my father, because of me. Because somewhere in the chaos of everything, you became the only real thing in my life. That's not fair. You can't manipulate me and then claim it's because you care. You're right. It's not fair. Nothing about this situation has been fair from the beginning. He stood, pacing. But I'm trying to be honest now. Trying to give you the choice I should have given you weeks ago. Stay or go, Mackenzie. But if you stay, stay because you want to. Not because of debt or obligation. But because this, he gestured between us, is something worth exploring. Something real. And if I choose to go? Pain flashed across his face. Then I'll make sure you have everything you need. Recommendations that will get you into any residency program you want. Financial support if you need it. Protection for your family, always. And I'll let you walk away without another word. He moved closer. But I'm asking, begging, if I have to, for you to at least consider staying. Not as my father's doctor, as something else. Whatever we decide that something else should be. My mind reeled. Free. I'd been free for weeks and hadn't known it. Could have walked out at any time if he'd just told me the truth. But would I have? If I was honest with myself, probably not. Because somewhere in the past months, this place had started to feel less like a prison and more like home. This family had become my family, and Santiago had become someone I couldn't imagine not seeing every day. I need time, I said finally. To think, to process all of this without you standing there looking at me like that. Like what? Like I'm something precious you're afraid to break. The words came out softer than I intended. That's because you are. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and cupped my face gently. You're the most precious thing in my world right now, Mackenzie Maloney. And I know I have no right to say that. No right to ask you to stay. But I'm saying it anyway. I'm asking anyway, because losing you terrifies me more than anything else I've faced. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, and I found myself leaning into the touch despite every logical reason not to. This is crazy. Completely. He smiled slightly. But the best things usually are. I should have stepped back, should have maintained distance, but instead, I found myself closing the space between us, my hands coming to rest on his chest, feeling his heart hammer beneath my palms. If I stay, I whispered, it's on my terms. I finish my degree. I start my residency. I make my own choices about my career and my life. You don't control me, Santiago. You don't own me just because I choose to be here. I wouldn't want to control you. That fire, that independence. That's what drew me to you in the first place. His other hand came up to frame my face. I want a partner, Mackenzie. An equal. Someone who'll call me on my bullshit and challenge me when I need it. Think you can do that? I've been doing it for weeks already. I know. His smile widened. It's incredibly attractive. Then he was kissing me, and I was kissing him back, months of tension finally finding release. His mouth was warm and demanding, tasting of whiskey and promise. I pressed closer, my fingers tangling in his hair, and he made a sound low in his throat that sent heat pooling through me. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. Stay, please. We'll figure out the rest as we go, but just stay. I thought about all the reasons I should refuse, about my plans, my career, my independence, about how complicated this would make everything. Then I thought about Don Salvatore's words, about recognizing the right person, about refusing to let them walk away. I'll stay, I said. For now. We'll try this, whatever this is, and see where it goes. But Santiago, the first time you try to control me or manipulate me the way you did with the debt, I'm gone. No second chances. Understood? Understood. Relief flooded his expression. You won't regret this, Mackenzie. I swear I'll spend every day proving that you made the right choice. You'd better. He kissed me again, slower this time, savoring, and standing there in the moonlit garden with his arms around me, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, this insane situation could actually work. That maybe choosing to stay was the first truly free choice I'd made since this all began, and maybe that made it the right one. 3 days after Don Salvatore woke up, reality came crashing back in a way none of us expected. I was conducting a routine neurological assessment when he suddenly gripped my wrist, his fingers strong despite weeks of atrophy. His eyes held an urgency that made my stomach clench. The night I was attacked, he said, his voice gaining strength daily. I remember now. It wasn't an enemy. It was family. My blood ran cold. Are you certain? I saw his face, right before. He stopped, his jaw tightening. I need to speak with Santiago. Alone. I found Santiago in his office, reviewing contracts that seemed to multiply exponentially now that his father was awake. When I relayed Don Salvatore's message, his expression went carefully blank. Did he say anything else? Just that he remembers who attacked him, and that it was family. Santiago was moving before I finished speaking, his controlled demeanor fracturing into something harder, more dangerous. I'd seen glimpses of this side of him over the past weeks, the man who managed violence with cold precision. But I'd never seen it fully unleashed. Until now. I waited outside while father and son spoke behind closed doors. Their voices rose and fell in Italian too rapid for me to follow, but the emotion was unmistakable. Rage, betrayal, the devastating pain of trust shattered from within. When Santiago emerged an hour later, his face was stone. Family meeting, tonight. Everyone needs to be here. Do you want me to stay with my father, keep him safe? His eyes met mine, and I saw something that frightened me. No matter who comes to that door, don't let anyone in except me or Dr. Castellano. Understand? Santiago, what's happening? Justice. The word was delivered with such cold finality that I shivered. Finally. The family arrived throughout the afternoon. I watched from Don Salvatore's window as cars pulled up, expensive vehicles disgorging men in suits and women in designer clothes. Bianca arrived looking worried. Vincent appeared grim. Others I didn't recognize filled the house with tense energy. My uncle, Don Salvatore explained from his bed. Marco, my younger brother. He was always ambitious, always resentful that I inherited control of the family while he had to serve as underboss. But I never thought. His voice broke slightly. I never thought he'd actually try to kill me. You're certain it was him? I saw his face. He hired someone, but he was there, watching, making sure it was done. Don Salvatore's hands clenched the sheets. 8 months, Mackenzie. 8 months of my son bearing burdens he shouldn't have had to carry. 8 months of my family operating without their patriarch. All because my own brother wanted my position. The meeting began at 7. I could hear the murmur of voices from below, growing progressively louder as more people arrived. Then Santiago's voice cut through the chaos, calling for silence. I shouldn't have listened. Should have stayed focused on my patient and let them handle family business. But curiosity, and concern for Santiago, drew me to the top of the stairs. Thank you all for coming on short notice, Santiago began, his voice carrying clearly through the house. I've called this meeting because my father has something to say, something that will change everything. A pause. Then Don Salvatore's voice, broadcast through what must have been a speaker system. 8 months ago, I was attacked in my own home. The assailant was never found. The investigation went cold. Everyone assumed it was a rival family, an act of war that we would eventually avenge. But they were wrong. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. I've remembered who ordered the attack, who stood in the shadows watching me bleed, who condemned his own brother to a coma, to possible death, for the sake of ambition. Don Salvatore's voice grew harder. Marco, my younger brother, my trusted underboss, you tried to kill me so you could take my place. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Denials, accusations, shock rippling through the room. But Santiago's voice cut through it all. Uncle Marco, do you deny these accusations? Of course I deny them. Marco's voice was indignant. This is insane! Salvatore just woke from a coma. His memories are clearly confused. I would never... Then explain this. The sound of papers rustling. Financial records showing payments to the man who attacked my father. Payments that trace back to your personal accounts. Explain the phone records showing you called that man 3 times in the week before the attack. Explain the testimony of your own driver. who's willing to state he took you to the location where you watched the assault happen. Silence, heavy and damning. You've been investigating me? Marco's voice had changed, losing its innocence, becoming something colder. The moment my father woke up and told me what he remembered, I had Vincent pull every record, every transaction, every communication you've made in the past year. It took 3 days, Uncle. 3 days to build an airtight case against you. 3 days to prove that you're a traitor to your own blood. Santiago, please. Marco's tone shifted to pleading. I can explain. The pressure, the temptation. Salvatore was such a strong Don, and I thought the family would be better served with new leadership. You thought you would be better served with power you didn't earn. Santiago's voice was arctic. You condemned your own brother to a coma. You put his children through months of grief and uncertainty. You jeopardized everything our grandfather built because of your own ambition. That's not leadership. That's betrayal of the highest order. What are you going to do? Marco asked, and I heard genuine fear creep into his voice. What tradition demands. What justice requires. A pause. You're cast out. Effective immediately. You're no longer part of this family. Your businesses, your assets, everything you've built under the Caputo name, stripped away. You're nothing now, Marco. Less than nothing. And if you're ever seen in our territory again, you'll be dealt with as the law requires. You can't do this. Salvatore, tell him. My son speaks with my full authority. Don Salvatore's voice was final. I raised you as my brother, Marco. Gave you position and respect you didn't deserve. And you repaid that kindness with violence. Get out of my sight. You're dead to me now. What followed was chaos. Marco being physically removed from the house by security. Family members arguing about the severity of the punishment. Some calling for blood, for Marco to be eliminated entirely rather than simply exiled. Santiago managing it all with iron control, his voice never rising but his authority absolute. I retreated to Don Salvatore's room before I was discovered eavesdropping. My patient was sitting up in bed, his face gray with stress and pain. It's done, he said quietly. My own brother. Family is supposed to be sacred, Mackenzie. It's supposed to mean something. It does mean something. That's why this hurts so much. I checked his vitals, concerned about the spike in his blood pressure. But you did the right thing. Justice over sentiment. Spoken like someone who's spent time with my son. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. He's good at that. Making the hard choices. He'll be a better Don than I ever was. He learned from the best. Maybe. Or maybe he's just naturally suited for this life in ways I never was. Don Salvatore looked at me. You're staying, aren't you? Despite everything. Despite how this all started. I am. Good. Santiago needs someone like you. Someone who sees past the power and the violence to the man underneath. Someone who'll keep him human when this world tries to make him into something else. He paused. But be careful, Mackenzie. Loving a man like my son, it's not easy. It will break your heart sometimes. The choices he'll have to make, the things he'll have to do. Can you live with that? I thought about what I'd just witnessed. The cold elimination of a family member, the ruthless efficiency of Santiago's investigation and judgment, the violence that lurked beneath every word, even if it hadn't been enacted tonight. I don't know yet, I admitted, but I'm willing to find out. Santiago appeared in the doorway an hour later, looking exhausted. His tie was loosened, his hair disheveled from running his hands through it. But his eyes held a darkness I hadn't seen before. It's handled, he said to his father. Marco is gone. The family has accepted the evidence and your judgment. There won't be any challenge to your authority. Our authority, Don Salvatore corrected. You're Dawn now, Santiago. This was your investigation, your presentation, your judgment. I simply backed your play. He looked between us. I'm tired. I need rest. And you two need to talk. Go. I'll be fine for a few hours. Santiago and I walked to his private study in silence. Once inside, he poured himself a generous whiskey and downed half of it in one swallow. Are you okay? I asked, closing the door behind us. I just destroyed my uncle. Stripped away everything he's built. Exiled him from the only family he's ever known. So no, I'm not particularly okay. He poured more whiskey. But it was necessary. He tried to kill my father. That can't go unpunished. I know. Your father told me he's proud of how you handled it. My father trained me well. He set down the glass. This is what my life is, Mackenzie. Tonight was relatively bloodless, but it won't always be. There will be times when justice requires more than exile. Times when I'll have to order things that will keep you up at night. Can you really live with that? I moved closer, taking the whiskey glass from his hands and setting it aside. I don't know. Ask me again tomorrow. And the day after. And the day after that. I'll keep answering until one of us changes our mind. And if you do change your mind, then I leave. But not because I'm afraid of you or what you do. Only if I genuinely can't reconcile loving you with the things you have to do. I framed his face with my hands, forcing him to look at me. I'm choosing you, Santiago. Consciously, deliberately, with full knowledge of what that means. Stop trying to scare me away. I'm trying to protect you. From what? From yourself? I kissed him softly. Too late. I already see exactly who you are, and I'm not running. His arms came around me, pulling me close with a desperation that belied his earlier control. I love you, he said against my hair. I know it's too soon and too complicated and probably makes everything worse. But I love you, Mackenzie Maloney, and I have no idea what to do about it. You could start by loving me back. The words escaped before I could reconsider them. I love you too. Against all logic and reason, despite the circumstances that brought us together. I love you. He pulled back enough to see my face, searching my expression for any hint of doubt or deception. Finding none, he kissed me with the intensity that stole my breath. This wasn't the tentative exploration of our first kiss in the garden. This was claiming, promise, the sealing of something that couldn't be undone. Stay, he murmured between kisses. Not just for now. Really stay. Build a life here. With me. With this family. I'll stay. But Santiago? I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I'm not giving up on my career, on medicine. That's non-negotiable. I wouldn't ask you to. We'll make it work. Whatever you need, wherever you need to be, we'll figure it out together. Together, I echoed, testing the word. It felt right. Felt possible. 2 months later, I walked across the stage at my medical school graduation. Don Salvatore sat in the audience with Bianca, both beaming with pride. Santiago stood at the back, his presence drawing curious looks from my classmates who wondered about the gorgeous, dangerous-looking man who couldn't take his eyes off me. I'd matched into my top-choice residency program. Neurology, naturally, at a hospital where Don Salvatore's generous donations had certainly helped, but where my academic record spoke for itself. I'd start in the fall, learning from the best while still maintaining my connection to the Caputo family. My parents came to graduation. It was the first time I'd seen them since moving into the compound. Mom cried. Dad looked at Santiago with a mixture of gratitude and residual fear. We had dinner together that evening, and I watched my father finally understand that his deal with the Caputos had been paid, that his daughters were safe, that he could stop carrying the weight of his choices. She's happy, I heard him tell Mom later. Our daughter is actually happy. I didn't ruin everything after all. He had, in a way. But he'd also given me something I never would have found on my own. A purpose. A family. A love that was complicated and dangerous and absolutely real. Back at the compound, I found Santiago in the garden where we'd had so many of our early conversations. He was standing by the fountain, staring at the water, with that contemplative expression I'd come to know so well. "Congratulations, Dr. Maloney," he said, turning as I approached. "How does it feel?" "Surreal. Terrifying. Perfect." I moved into his embrace, fitting against him like I'd been designed for this purpose. "Your father gave a speech at the reception, told everyone about how I saved his life, conveniently leaving out the parts about debt and coercion. The past doesn't matter, only what we choose to make of the present." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, and my breath caught. "Which brings me to something I've been wanting to ask you. Been waiting for the right moment. Thought tonight might be it. Santiago, let me say this before I lose my nerve." He opened the box, revealing a ring that was both elegant and understated. A single diamond surrounded by smaller sapphires, set in platinum. "I know we started this all wrong. I know I coerced you and manipulated you and kept you here under false pretenses. But somewhere in the chaos, I fell in love with you. And every day since, I've been grateful that your father made that deal with mine, because it brought you into my life. So, Dr. Mackenzie Maloney, will you marry me? Will you choose to stay, not because of debt or obligation, but because you want to build a life with me?" I should have hesitated, should have considered all the logical reasons this was a terrible idea. But standing there with moonlight reflecting off the fountain and Santiago looking at me with absolute vulnerable honesty, I found I didn't care about logic. "Yes," I said, "I'll marry you. I'll build a life with you. I'll be part of your family and your world, and whatever comes next. Yes." His smile was brilliant and free, the kind of genuine joy I'd rarely seen from him. He slipped the ring onto my finger. Perfect fit, naturally, then kissed me like we had all the time in the world. "This family," he murmured against my lips, "is going to be the death of me, but at least I'll die happy." "No one's dying." I kissed him again. We've all had enough of comas and near-death experiences for one lifetime. We walked back to the house hand in hand, ready to share the news, ready to face whatever came next together, because that's what we were now. Partners, equals. Two people who'd found each other in the most impossible circumstances and decided that love was worth fighting for. The debt was paid, the obligation fulfilled. But I was staying anyway. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. And that made all